which I didn't realize. evening. I would like to call to order the Kaiser Long Range Planning Task Force. It is Monday, March 10th, 2025, and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Susan London. Here. Councillor Kohler.
Here.
Jane Erb.
Here.
Councillor Parsons.
Here.
Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Council President Starr.
Here.
Elaine Wilson.
Here.
Councillor Duran.
Here.
Melissa Martin.
Here.
Councillor Christopher.
She'll be here.
Okay. Matthew Stahlheim.
Here.
Councillor Cross.
Councillor Cross is excused this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you all for all your work in preparing for this, as you did last November, to keep us up to date with our budgetary process. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from the November 2024 Long Range Planning Task Force meeting. Were there any additions or corrections to note by anybody? Motion to approve?
I so move to approve the November 2024 minutes.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve minutes from the November 2024 Long Range Planning Task Force meeting. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, signify by saying no. No objection. Motion passes unanimously. That leads us then to the presentation of the Long Range Planning forecast, and I'll go to City Manager Brown and our Assistant City Manager and Finance Director, Mr. Tim Wood. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Budget Committee members, or Long Range Planning Task Force members. Mr. Wood's going to have the presentation tonight, and we'll wrap up with the council goals that were worked through just a couple meetings ago. Mr. Wood.
Thank you, everyone. Whoa, I'll push it back a little bit. A little bit hot. It gets a little hot whenever we add in these extra boxes so that we can have the microphones go all the way out. So that always it presents a new wrinkle for us. Anyway, tonight we got a few things on the agenda. We're going to go over the city in total, do kind of a big picture overview. Then we will take a look at the general operating fund. That includes the park fund and the police services fee. So those get all wrapped up together. We'll also take a look at the water system, the stormwater system.
Time. Yeah. Let's go ahead, if we could switch that up.
I'm going to need that. That would be the same thing. It's that box. That's our issue.
Thank you.
Okay, that was fun. Can you hear me now?
No. Are you on?
Test.
There we go.
Okay. All right, we're going to do this rock star style, and I'm going to eat the microphone tonight. Okay, so as I was saying, we have a few things on the agenda tonight. We're going to look at the city overall. We'll take a quick look at things that impact the city in total. We will switch to our general operating fund. That includes all of our general fund, which is police, parks, municipal court. In addition, it'll include the park service fee and the police services fee. We kind of lump all those together. We're going to take a look at the water system, the stormwater system, and the American Rescue Act Fund. We have a few funds remaining. And then as City Manager Brown indicated, we'll take a look at the City Council goals. And then I think you'll be so overwhelmed there won't be any questions at all, right?
You'll be so thorough.
Okay, so citywide overview. I tried to make the print as small as possible on this one. Really, there's only a couple things that I really want to draw your attention to. If you look in this general area, at the upper left, you can see the total program revenues are starting to drop in the general governmental activities. This is because we received ARPA funds in the previous year that we didn't get during the current year. You can kind of see that if we go to the middle in the business activities, and we are seeing a slight pickup in revenues there. That's the result of the increase in sewer rates. So overall, when we look at our revenues, that's one key area of looking at the health of the city. If the revenues continue to increase, we're able to continue to keep up with cost of living, inflation type of things, as well as continue to provide services. One of the things that, from an accounting standpoint, when we look at this, if someone were to say, what's one number that can help dictate the health of the city, that would be our ending net position, and that is the bottom line. So you can see our ending net position for the governmental activities is starting to decline. That could indicate that we're starting to see a little bit of pressure as far as the activities go and our ability to continue to provide services. You can see over here in the government or in the business activities, we're also seeing a little bit of pressure downwards as the ending net position starts to decrease. That's something we need to keep our eye on. In general, if that number is increasing slightly every year, that's a good thing. The fact that it's starting to go down means that we're probably seeing some turn in the trends that we're seeing, and we need to keep our eye on that. So that's really all I wanted you to see on this thing, and that's why I made the print so small. This does come straight out of our audited financial statements. So if you want to dig deeper into what some of these numbers are, you can look there. That would be your best resource. With respect to the city, the number one thing that really has a big impact is population growth. As the population grows, there's a bigger strain in the city providing services. You can see over the chart at the lower left, we've had a few years of pretty big increases, and since about 2021, we've leveled off. The areas where you see the big spikes, coincidentally, that's shortly after you see a big increase in permit activity. So that would indicate that we've built some apartments, living centers, that kind of a thing. So we really do operate on if you build it, they will come here in Kaiser. Overall, Kaiser is the 15th largest city, and you can see that we've been growing about 0.65% per year for the last 10 years.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. As we look at the overall city staffing, I've said this every year since I've been around, but we budget a certain number of positions and we've yet to ever be fully staffed. I think we were fully staffed for like 1 week, and then a few police officers gave their notices that they're going to retire. This year is no exception. Unfortunately, if you look at the trend of the blue lines in 2022-23 through 2024-25, you can see that we've been hit pretty hard by retirements and turnover. Mostly those are in the area of the police department and our environmental stormwater group. Although we have had a lot of turnover in our utility billing area, parks, and a little bit in public works as well. So the gray tsunami has kind of hit us as people start to leave the city. That's really evident when we start looking at the average years of service. This year, average years of service was 10.74. We're down almost a whole year because last year our average years of service was 11.62. So staffing is one of the things that does keep me up at night, the ability to find, attract, and retain those staffing. At this point, we don't have any frozen positions. We're just having a hard time filling the positions. Primarily law enforcement, and I think that's common throughout all the agencies in the state. So everyone's looking for law enforcement officers, and it's just hard to find them.
Okay. Any questions on that thus far? Councillor Christopher.
Sorry, Tim, I'm going back to the second table because it's so freaking small. It took me that long for my eyes to focus in and read it. So 2020 was the largest population that we had.
That is correct. That was the results of the census.
And
So I
we've gone
think
down since.
I think the census may have overshot their mark a little bit. And then the following year, we kind of had a catch up to get us back to where we probably were.
Okay. So from our high mark, we're off like 400s. And is that, so why do you think that is, Tim?
That was statewide.
I think when the census numbers came out, if you take
You
out
think
that
it's just
big-
that census?
Yeah, I think it's strictly just the census.
Okay.
It just kind of threw things a little sideways for us. And then when they did their estimates following that every year since, it's been, well, whoops, we made a mistake.
Okay.
Tim, can I also, and I'll probably look at Mr. Witham, we are also getting the numbers, the new numbers from the Portland Population Research Center, and Oregon on the whole experienced a decrease in population during the pandemic years, if I recall correctly. Oh,
Yes.
kill it, kill it.
Anybody's on?
Well, that goes along with being a C.
Here we go.
Are we talking about tech? All right, that was awesome. Thank you. It's always good when you have a feedback loop happening and a microphone's actually off. It's kind of tricky. So yes, there is those numbers, and it's a little bit hard. I've sat through several over the last several years with Portland State and their population research center, and they do attribute it to several factors. Actually, Councilor Duran and I were on a call a few weeks ago, and there is some trends that are different, not just in Oregon, but on the national level that are specific to birth rates that has affected population growth, and also like in-migration and out-migration of where people are choosing to live. So there is a number of factors. These are the population estimates are the certified population estimates. So you do have like the census number, and then you have estimates that go beyond that. And then in addition, they project, which is, I don't know, there's like a magical black box of projecting population. Most people will say that when you're looking out and the further of projecting your population, just know that you'll always have a wrong number. So, but there are some factors with certain demographic groups, and birth rates being lower than they've been in modern history in certain areas, which is just kind of a new thing. So,
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I tend to think of the census, the decennial census, as a truing up of the numbers, which, I mean, it shows we jumped from 19 to 20 by almost 900. And then I think, frankly, I think in our case, PSU's numbers are lower than we should, but just based on the history of the decennial census and the intermediate estimates done by PSU. So every number in between the decennial census are PSU's numbers. So on that table there, the 2020 is the census number that was an actual count, 39,442. And then, to think that we lost 309 people in that year is, I'm not sure I buy it.
So the next year's PSU?
Mm-hmm.
So the PSU is 21, 22, 23, 24.
Yes.
Yep.
And even though we may not like that number, it's what we have to go by. It's the federally accepted estimate for the state of Oregon. What that comes into place is when we get the projections that are done per capita from the state for the revenue sharing. So if we only grew by 69 people, then that per capita rate is only going to grow by that.
Okay, anything further on the population estimates? I'm going to emphasize the word estimates.
Those do have an impact on our property taxes, franchise fees, share of the shared revenues from the state as well. So to the extent that we're growing faster or slower than the rest of the state, it does have an impact on our revenues. Any more questions on staffing overall?
Okay, good on the staffing numbers? Okay, and answered any questions about the difference between the actual and budgeted? That we still have open positions, but none are frozen? Okay.
Moving on, the city is not, we have not been isolated from the impacts of inflation, unfortunately. One of the things when we look at our staffing, we do try to keep up with our comparators. So to the extent that other cities, agencies our size are making increases in their cost of living, wage, salary, that kind of thing, we do try to keep up. Our goal is not to be the leading edge of that. We'd like to be in the middle of the pack slightly. So with that, the CPI that we typically start with to compare salary and wages came in at 2.7 for last year. So in comparison, the KPA, our police union, has already negotiated a salary increase of 3.5%. The Public Works Union also has negotiated. They have a min-max, and their max is the bottom, which is the CPI. So they're going to be looking at a 2.7. We're right now playing with a 2.7 for the unrepresented. And then we also have a new wrinkle this year. We have a new police union for the sergeants. They're still in active negotiations, so we're not sure where that one's going to land just yet. But this is the factor that we use to index all of our salaries and wages moving forward into the future. It would be nice if we were similar to a business that you could base it off of something like profit sharing or something like that. However, that's not really the focus of the city of Kaiser. I don't think we'd really want to run our police department like a business on a fee-for-service kind of basis. So it does present a wrinkle in how do we properly compensate our employees.
Questions? Okay. When does this, when does the CPI come out?
Sure. I typically track the CPI every month. It's a monthly index that gets posted, and it's usually about the 12th or 13th of the month. The one that we typically look at is for a calendar year 2024.
Okay. All right. Anything further? Okay.
Moving on, the next big ugly thing related to staffing is PERS. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see for the last 2 years, we spent about $2.6 million in PERS contributions. This does not include the issue with our retirees. We'll get to that shortly. However, with the rates that we're expecting to see starting July 1st, 2025, that number will probably go to 3 million, 3.1 million range. So it's going to be a fairly significant impact on the city. This is one of the reasons why City Manager Brown has been stressing the importance of us setting up a side account for PERS. That's basically us prepaying some of our PERS liability, so the contribution rates are significantly less into the future. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on another slide. But it's going to be a significant impact for the city as we absorb the additional PERS contributions next year. One of the things that you can see, which I think is kind of an interesting trend, on the left side, the tier 1, tier 2 folks, those are the folks that have typically been the most expensive. You can see back 10 years ago, we had 35 employees. We're down to 12 now. So as they phase out of the employment system, some of those costs tend to go away. However, with the contribution rates as they are, the tier 3 folks are starting to catch up pretty quickly. And unfortunately, they'll probably pass the tier 1, tier 2 folks next year.
So I'll come to you. So the total will reach that level, but the contribution being it's not an automatic benefit, it's the match contribution. It's a different system between the OPSERP and the tier 1 and 2, correct? So we're not going to see these big ballooning things happening to us like we do with tier 1 and tier 2. Is that correct? Ish?
Ish.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they're both defined benefit programs, so you're still going to see those big bumps. The difference is the legislators have hopefully scaled back the benefits for the tier 3 folks enough that the ongoing benefit payments into the future are less. So at one point they're trying to peg the tier 3 folks, I think, at about 60% of their final average salary. That's in comparison to some of the tier 1, tier 2 folks that are 100% plus of what their average salary was. So a significant scale back of benefits, unfortunately, is the answer.
Well, as an OPSERP myself, I can attest to the significantly scaled back. But, yeah, but that is what was negotiated, with the OPSERP program versus the tier 1 and tier 2. So that was what, I fully expected. Councilor Christopher, did you have something on that? You have one? Okay. Go
I
ahead.
did. My mind might have.
How about I go to, Mr. Thompson and circle back?
Do.
Mr. Thompson.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Wood, so since we're thinking long-term here, these PERS rates are projected to increase for a while longer. My question is, since they can only increase so much per year, at what point do you think we will catch up and things will nose over and they will start coming back down, or do you have any idea? I mean, because I feel like because they're not increasing as fast as they probably should be because of the rate collar, that we're going to have a long tail on this thing.
I really think I need my magic wand tonight.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
Yeah, right. Today is probably not the right day to ask me with the stock market kind of doing its thing. It really is dependent upon investment returns. That's one of the biggest factors that's really out of everyone's control. To the extent the investments don't hit the 6.9 assumed rate, it's going to be painful for a while. I really think probably we're looking 4 to 6 years, and the rates, at least the models that I've been looking at, level off and start to drop down a little bit.
Thank you. Councilor Christopher.
Okay, I remembered. So did you talk about you made reference to the employee problem that we had with PERS? That was not anyone's fault. It happened 30 years ago, correct? Did we talk about that in long-range planning? Does everybody know what he's talking about? Okay, so we've already talked about that. So my question is, you were going to, and maybe I'm stepping ahead, but you were going to tell us which would be, well, okay. The plan was sell city-owned property and pay down some of this PERS liability. And the question was, which to pay down? The employee problem PERS problem, or our PERS liability? Will you be talking about that today?
We will.
Okay.
Yes. I'm glad that you brought it up. You're about 2 slides away from glory.
Okay.
Nice tee up. Anything else on the PERS as it stands right here?
Oh, you're right. That's right.
We're projecting well.
So the big message is the pain is going to continue for the near future on this. Going on to the next slide. So our tier 1, tier 2 problem that we brought up, this kind of raised its head. Just want to give you a quick update on it. Overall, the issue was 30 years ago when the city started a 457 employer match contribution. That employer match contribution should have been included as subject salary, which is the basis for calculating retirement benefits for tier 1, tier 2 folks. So we should have basically, throughout the years, 6%, we should have reported higher as our employees' salaries. Based off of where we're at right now, there's been 71 tier 1, tier 2 accounts that have been identified that have been impacted. That includes current and former employees. 23 of those accounts have been completely rectified, done, all said for, and that's total cost of $469,500. I have 5 accounts that I still need some required settlement agreements. Unfortunately, 2 of the accounts are from some deceased retirees, so we're still kind of working through the beneficiary process on that as well. So five folks need to get me some paperwork, if you're listening. 43 accounts are sitting with PERS as we speak, waiting for PERS to process the corrections. They've been slowly working through them. They've had a few starts and stops as they figured out, oh, we didn't do this one quite right, so they had to do some rework. So we're keeping our eye on everything that they're doing, making sure that the calculations that they're ending up with are okay, in addition to what the city is paying them for those corrections.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, I know when you, there is no we, you started the process of the reconciliation, you had some estimates for each of the accounts. When you look at the 23 accounts that have been corrected for a total cost of $469,500, how close have what you predicted or projected, how close were we to what PERS reconciled? How close were you? There is no we, let's be real.
We're all in this together. I've been very pleasantly surprised. It's come actually less than what I thought it was going to be for the majority of the folks. Overall, when we first started this, I thought we would be around the $3.5 million range. I think we'll still be in that neighborhood. So I feel good about that.
So a lot of that kudos goes to you for the accuracy of the projections. That is where I'm getting to.
Thank you.
To get to.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I mean, he just said, so I can encourage him and recognize good work for 23 of the accounts done so far.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Yep. Get her done.
Okay, so now I'm supposed to get out my Harry Potter wand and make some magic. So the question really was 6 months ago when we last got together, if we sell property, what's the better use of the funds? So we currently have authorization for up to 5.5 million in debt. We're not going to take all that out. We're only going to take out what we need if we need to. Like I indicated earlier, I think it's going to be closer to 3.5 million. The city is in the process of selling some properties, combined gross proceeds of 5.5 million. So really the question is, if we take 3.5 million of that, use that to create a side account with PERS. PERS said, oh, this is a great idea. We'll give you $300,000 on top of that as a match. If we do that, the city could save 6.3 million in contributions over the next 20 years. I
For
know.
the next
20. 314,000 per year.
So that equates to about 314,000 in savings per year. I kind of like that number because it does set us on a pretty good trajectory. If we take the 3.5 million and say we're not going to take out any debt at all, that would save the city about 4.8 million in principal and interest payments over the next 15 years. So we kind of got an apples and orange analysis, but this is really the best I could do. So if we avoided the debt, it'd be about 317 per year that we'd be missing. I kind of like the $6.3 million idea though myself. I know it does take a little 5 years longer, but I think there's some benefit to that. Plus it's an ongoing benefit of having paid down our ongoing liability. So more to come on this as we get closer to the having to issue debt or not issue debt. We'll have to come back to the city council for some further discussion on which direction we want to go. But that's where my Harry Potter wand is right now.
Questions? Piggybacking on the thanks, yeah, we did ask for this comparison to keep us apprised, especially as properties are beginning to turn over. And those funds are being actualized with the sale of properties. There's more to come, I would anticipate. So we will have the funds to be able to start making these decisions for our long-term stability. So my question is, right now we have 2 properties that are in the process. As more come online and those dollars come in, I will ask the question about where should that next tranche go to benefit us? So, we can be thinking about that, for our long-term, stability. Okay? All right.
Okay, now we're going to switch topics and move to our general operating fund. I think I say this every time, but this is our junk drawer of funds. Anything that's not supposed to be accounted elsewhere is accounted here. So if there's legal statutes that say you have to do something with, say, like our street fund or water fund or storm fund, we won't include those expenses or revenues in the general operating fund. Right now, this includes our police department, some general government, parks, planning, municipal court, and then you folks created the transient occupancy tax area for me last year, and that was loads of fun. The police department makes up about 66% of the general fund, so it's the vast majority of what goes in there. The general fund is our most constrained fund. We have really limited ability to generate revenues in the general fund, or historically we have. So if you look at the chart, you can see our revenue and expense line. We're always on the edge of spending a little bit more than what we take in, although we kind of tend to scale it back if we need to. But this has been the history of this fund since probably the beginning of time. We've never had a really big spread between the money coming in and the money going out. And that's a little bit by design, forcing the city to provide as much services as we possibly can. And again, we're talking parks, police, municipal court, those kind of things here. So we want to get the maximum bang for the buck.
Ms. Martin?
So are these numbers based on like being fully funded or fully staffed, city and police, all these projections?
So far, most of these are actuals based off of December 31st numbers. Although there's a few that if I look out and I've seen what's happened in January, February, I'll make an adjustment to it.
Okay, thank you.
But when we get into the projections, those are going to be some big broad strokes of just some general trends. So they're not going to be, they are based off of full staffing though, so.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay.
So looking at the top line, our resources coming in, but you can see that the property taxes are the vast majority. It makes up almost half of the revenues that we get in. So our property taxes at this point would not fully fund a police department by themselves. In addition to the property taxes, we also have franchise fees. And then we also have intergovernmental, and then the police and parks fee. Everything else is almost considered rounding at that point. We have been trying to diversify our resources coming in, and that's really what happened with the 2017 edition of the police and the parks fee. Moving on to property taxes. This is, for some reason, this is my favorite picture of property taxes, and it really tells a lot about the city. Really, if you look at the composition of property taxes, we're by and large a residential community. About 70% is residential, then we have some commercial, and then everything else is really rounding. You can see the real market value kind of spike up and continue to increase, and it's well above the total assessed values. That's good if you're a current property owner. It's kind of bad if you're trying to buy property here because it's expensive. So that kind of sums up, also being a residential area, providing services is much more of a challenge. When you figure that there's 8 households on an acre of land compared to maybe 1 business on an acre of land. The number of services, the people to provide those services are much more complicated, and you require more to serve that area than you would in an industrial or commercial area. So it is expensive, hard to provide services.
Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Wood, when we build a bunch of apartment buildings and such, is that good or bad for us?
It is mixed. It's nice because we have one place that we're providing, say, water services to, but then you have 20 places where you're providing police services to.
But tax revenue wise, is it better for us or not really?
That's my, I want to speak, call sign. The best tax efficiency is for downtowns, which we don't have a downtown. When you look at tax efficiency, the tax number of tax dollars brought in per acre, that's why downtowns are really good. Having said that, we don't have a downtown, we have a long, River Road, which is not, doesn't have the kind of density that would make it, really highly tax efficient. The least productive, least tax efficient land is gonna be something like Kaiser Station. And it has a lot of other benefits, like bringing people to town and spending money and stuff like that, but as far as tax dollars brought in per square foot, it's very tax inefficient. So, homes are somehow, homes, it just depends on the density and the bedroom mix.
Okay, anything? All right,
It's dangerous. Moving on to property taxes. You can see the history of the value of the permits that we've issued. As we looked at the population growth, you know, it's not a coincidence that 2016, 17, 2017, 18, we saw a large spike in the growth. Just before that, we saw an increase in permits. They're building apartments, residential facilities, those kind of things. And that's really what drew the spike up in the population growth for the years that follow. You can see 22, 23, we saw a little bit of a spike and then drop down in 23, 24. I would anticipate that probably 2025 we'll see a spike in the population growth going up a little bit. And that's, again, because we saw some apartment complexes coming on. So it's kind of interesting to see how that works. Last year we did
sorry, we have a question from Mr. Stahlheim.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Do you have any reason to suspect, other than just the apartments being built themselves, that there's actually an appropriate demand for growth here in Kaiser?
Yeah, probably have to turn that over to planning a little bit more, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's a super awesome and easy question to answer. So it is super hard, Matthew. In the land use planning world, we are required in the state of Oregon to plan for a 20-year need based on population growth. So Portland State's Population Research Center does population projections. And I believe it was 2018, and then we did a little bit of an update to 2019. We showed that we had a need for housing types in the residential realm. Oh, I cannot remember how many acres. Significantly less than what we had previously operated under. Our adopted housing needs analysis and economic opportunities analysis basically showed that we needed like 254, 58 acres of residential land and like 67 acres of industrial / job land, which was based on some target industry approaches. When we did our update in 2018, 2019, and then we kind of paused it because we were waiting for numbers for the census in 2020. And then ultimately we didn't end up adopting that study, but in that study, it showed almost no need for additional lands. But part of that is also we're in a shared urban growth boundary. So the planning for that 20-year horizon goes in the whole urban growth boundary. I don't know who said it earlier, it may have been Mr. Wood, but what we have seen, and I'm not a real estate professional, but what we have seen in the real estate market is that housing in Kaiser goes fast and it gets snapped up real quick. And there's generally way less houses on the market in our area than in surrounding areas. So I think there's definitely a demand there, but it may not be from a strict population growth number. But then it's always that cart and horse discussion of, well, if you don't have any ability to grow, how can you grow? And so, and we've been without vast tracts of land for years and years and years. And we've been doing infill development since 2000. Basically my whole career here, it's been mostly infill development. I think the largest subdivision that we've approved in the last 5 years, well, we did just approve a townhouse development that's 21 lots technically for townhomes, but prior to that it was like 15 lots was the biggest subdivision we'd done in the last 7 or 8 years. And that's really a function of just not having large tracts of land. So I think it is hard. There's been some new work at the state level. There's the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, and the governor's office has basically put a pretty aggressive goal of producing housing. And so we will be doing yet another update with a housing capacity analysis as well as a housing production strategy. It's kind of a new requirement that we're going to have in the next couple of years. I think our time frame is 27. Actually, they're having a meeting on that just recently to adopt the schedule at LCDC. But so I think that's a really hard question to answer. It depends on how you look at it. You can kind of look at it from within the confines of the rules, there's not a great need. But then anecdotally and based on growth when there is available land, it fills up very fast. So you kind of go, oh, okay, well, maybe there is more of a need. So does that help at all?
So long as we're not hindering too much, so that.
Yep.
Thank you. Further questions? Ms. Erb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I do want to go back to Dan's question because I didn't understand the answer. I'm sorry. But if you could do some sort of concrete example, like it would be 2 houses built on an acre, for example, single-family homes, but maybe it's 20 apartments on an acre. In real dollars, is it more tax revenue coming in for those 2 homes and less for the apartments, or vice versa, or how does that work? Thank you.
Sure. I guess don't quote me on this. This is kind of the back of the napkin. So really we could get probably about 8 houses on an acre. So given that, probably the apartment complex, just because of the value of the building itself, is going to be probably more tax revenue. But if you're comparing an acre to an acre, probably not a whole lot more. But I can put together some more detailed analysis when we get together for the budget committee time.
And then the other, maybe to factor into that, also the examples where the real market value versus the artificially created assessed value through the, was a change property ratio that they use to drop down the amount that we can use for the assessed.
Yep.
I think it also tells a tale that is something we don't control, that's constitutional as I understand it, or at least
Bad
measure
tale.
50. So, Ms. Christopher?
Tells a
Councilor
bad
Christopher.
tale.
Yeah, it does.
Does that apply to apartments too? Does that ratio?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Everything.
Yep.
Explain to the committee what that is. Because it's,
How about you give me about 2 slides?
oh,
And then
okay.
There we go,
we'll
we're
get
getting
there.
ahead again.
This is, you guys are all brilliant. You are so far ahead of me. I feel like I'm slow tonight. So we did a deep dive on property taxes last year, so I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time. But Measure 5 came out in 1990, and that introduced the idea of compression, where you can only charge so much. Kaiser really doesn't have a compression issue right now, so we're just going to move on. Measure 50, which came out in 1997, really turned property taxes into a strictly mathematical formula for us. It locked in our permanent rate of 2.0838. So that's always going to be our assessed rate. The budget committee and city council can do less than that, but they can't ever do any more. The only way you could do more is if we unincorporated and tried to reincorporate, and that would be scary. And we don't want to do that. So the city's assessed value also got locked in 1997 at the 96 rate. And they said, okay, so that's your new assessed value. You can't ever change that. However, every year, the maximum amount that can go up is 3%. So every year, 3% you add to your assessed value, get the new assessed value. They do let you add in any new construction. However, as we've indicated here, you don't get a whole lot for new construction. Moving on to the next page. So this was kind of an example, and some of the myths, people think, oh, I just built a new house, so the market value is now the assessed value. Not so fast. They said, okay, we want everything to be somewhat equitable, so they came up with this idea called the change property ratio. So in this situation, we have a house that was built in 1998. Real market value now is 490,000-ish. Assessed value, 255. And to do the tax rate, you get $531 a tax, which is, actually don't tell anyone, but this is my house, so. The one next to it, built in 2003, 490,000, about the same market value. But the county says, oh, wait, that would be not very nice of us to charge taxes on 490,000. So they basically take a 50% cut to reduce the assessed value to get it similar to what it would have been back in 96, or a house comparable to a 96 house. So actually a house built in 2023 is paying less property taxes than I am in my old house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it gets worse. So the column on the right, a new apartment complex. This is a real life example here in Kaiser that came on. It's only assessed at 41% of the market value. So yeah, terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible, right. Right. And if I actually had the acreage, we could do the acreage calculation, and that's what I'll go back and add to this for our next time we get together. So then we can figure out if it's better to have apartments or houses. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Christopher.
So is this, you probably know more about this, you're very involved with League of Oregon Cities. So, Mayor, how do we change this?
Well, that's a complex answer because counties and cities don't agree on solutions. And what's been difficult has been getting people together to admit there's a problem even.
This is the problem.
Well, yes, but we're seeing it very starkly here, but we've actually had some knockdown, drag out debates on whether this problem even exists. Especially between counties and cities, because it affects counties differently. There's been that level of debate. I think it's becoming more and more starkly obvious, and also the disparity between Mr. Wood's home and new homes that were paying different amounts for the same services. And on top of that, you've got neighboring homes that may have been built at the same time, but based on where they were in getting their property assessment, they may have wildly different rates over time that have continued to separate. This is very mathematical, it's very complicated, and one of the things that I, among many others across the state, are saying, can we just have a conversation about what are the range of options to fix this and bring things back and work towards some alignment without just walloping the current property owners. We've got people with farms, we have people with homes that they've inherited. And the concern is if you start to true this up, what's that going to do to the current property owners or an heir? So there's a lot of moving parts with this, but if we can be part of the conversation about clearly what may have worked in 1997, newsflash folks, this is 2025. Things changed. And you're right. We need to come to a consensus. Two things can happen. There's a few elements that can be statutorily changed through legislation, but by and large, this is embedded in Measure 50, and that's in the Oregon State Constitution.
Okay.
Did I get anything wrong there? Nope.
I concur.
You hear lots of comments and lots of dialogue about repealing Measure 50, but Measure 50 is not the problem. This formula is the problem. And I don't think that folks that build brand new homes and buy them for $500,000 expect to be taxed at $249,000. They don't even know that. That's a bonus. And I think,
Yeah. I am
think this,
completely,
you know, this portion of 50, if this was changed, this would change the world.
it would really help a lot of cities, especially the ones like us who are operating on that razor thin edge year over year, and new investment in our community should be able to pay for the services that are
Yes.
being received. And the way I interpret that is that it does not.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
I'm going to go to Mr. Brown, Mr. Wood, and then see if there's other questions.
This has been on the top of the League of Oregon Cities lobbying issues for quite a few years. And it's from a public policy perspective, it's not as easy as doing a resale reset because it would literally double the taxes. When you're looking at $519 or $531, that's only the city's portion. They have
Right.
the county, the fire district, and school districts all on top of that. So doubling of your current taxes would be not possible. So it's got to be something of a gradual separation or retake than a simple uncap or,
Definitely would love to, like I said, one of the issues has been alignment between the two major lobbying organizations, the Association of Oregon Counties and the League of Oregon Cities. There was a presentation, I believe it's still on the LOC website. Highly recommend that you go to the website and look it up, on explaining the Measure 50, just broken down, case by case. And it was done by a commercial real estate accountant out of Portland, who did a fantastic job explaining this nuts and bolts, and also what it does for mortgage lending. One of the, for lack of a better word, one of the unfortunate consequences of this has also been property taxes resulting in redlining. Because with different neighborhoods having been assessed differently in 1997 has resulted in a disparity of the property tax. You get now to 2025, and the difference between two properties with the same sale price, the month-to-month payment, the difference, according to mortgage lenders I know, is the property tax. Whether or not you're going to be able to afford that monthly payment, the difference is that, whether or not you can buy that home or not. And that has resulted in disparity, especially in particular neighborhoods that developed differently over the last 40 years or 30 years. So there's a really good presentation on what that does to mortgage lending rates or payments for people. So yes, we need to engage, and I'm really proud that our council has been supportive of engaging in that conversation to figure this out. So anyway, yes. Anything further? Yeah.
And another common myth is the assessed value does not change when there's a change in ownership. So there's been some thought that, oh, if my neighbor's house sells, then their property taxes go up. That is not the case in Oregon. So the assessed value only goes up 3% unless you do some new construction on your house, so.
Yeah, we don't have, I think they call that reset on sale, and that is not how Oregon does it.
Yep. Moving on, license and fees. City does charge franchise fees with all of the utility providers in the area. The vast majority of the fees come from electricity, so that would be Salem Electric, PGE. They have initiated some rate increases over the last couple of years, if you haven't been noticing. So we are projecting that the franchise fees will be going up. Telephone and cable continue to decline, but overall we're seeing just a slight increase in license and fees every year. And I think that will probably continue into the future. So not a lot to see there other than those are relatively stable funding source for us.
Okay, Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, you mentioned on the very last bullet point that telephone and cable are going to continue decreasing as we continue to go, I guess, virtual is, so to speak, in terms of going through like the streaming services and we go to cell phones. What's that equal to in terms of revenue? The decrease, do you have any estimates on that, or is that another magic wand question?
So for telephone, we probably get $6,000 to $8,000 a year. So it's not a whole heck of a lot, but it's declining 500 to 1,000 every year. With respect to cable, we did peak during the COVID times at about, just south of 400,000. We're getting down to the low 300,000s as far as that goes, and I would expect it to continue to decrease.
So, can I
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where are we so when you look back though, so on slide 12, wherever slide 12 is, what's the proportionate amount of that from that revenue? And where that goes into the general fund, and where are we gonna get that as it continues going down? Magic wand?
Magic wand. Yeah, unfortunately.
But what's the proportionate, percentage of decrease every year for that?
Well, for telephone, we're seeing decreases of 10 to 15%. Cable, we're seeing 8 to 10% decreases.
But how much of,
That's-
what's the percentage of the total that we're bringing in for the,
Oh,
the
okay.
decrease? So is it every year we're seeing of that amount for franchise fees? Are we seeing, what's the decrease amount? Percentage, do you see what I'm trying to get to?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do some mental math.
Oh, sorry.
We get about 3.5 million in franchise fees every year. So with 320,000 of those, not big dollars.
Okay, thank you. That's where, thank you.
Yeah, I think
That's
they
what-
represent maybe 10% of the overall.
Okay, thank you.
That's an ouchie though. $327,000, that's real money
Well,
for our budget.
But I would concur.
but that's
Counselor
if they-
Christopher.
That's if they went completely away, but they're up. The other franchise fees are up. So I'm thinking there's a potential that the other franchise fees for gas, electric, garbage, broadband, water and sewer could lift that up and overcompensate for the diminishing revenues that are coming in with phone and cable.
That is correct. We will
Yeah.
continue to see a slight increase in those.
Yeah, okay.
Especially with electricity doing their craziness the last year or two.
Ziply. Yeah. So that was a really good comment on broadband, because we have the new franchise, and that's Ziply. So that is a new income stream for us this, coming up this year would it be now or is when they start getting customers?
It would require them to have customers, yes.
So right now, this is their building year where they're doing the installation, and once they open up to take on customers, then we will get that 5% franchise fee from them, correct?
Seven.
We don't get it from Comcast though.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we get from Comcast. So. Mr. Lindsay,
What was your question? I'm sorry.
the percentage for broadband for Ziply.
Well, here's the issue with the way that the FCC controls what is called access services, which is broadband, because of the Internet Freedom Act, was never taxed. And so we're waiting for that definition to change to actually include broadband, and then there will be a nice spike. But I'm not holding my breath on that one quite yet, because that's a huge lobby. And so the the broadband folks make a lot of money and they don't necessarily want us coming in and you know, because ours are really a pass-through. Our franchise fees are pass-through anyway, but they have protected that so far with the Internet Freedom Act.
So I'm going to ask a question that will probably have to put a pin in it. Is there a difference between a franchise fee and a right-of-way fee? If we were, would we be able to charge rights-of-way if we were just doing that rather than franchise?
There's a lot of theories on the way in which you guys can try to utilize your right-of-way and actually also utilize the fact that people do business in town. And so those are slightly different. Like a franchise fee is the way we control what's in the ground.
Right.
Like a utility fee can just be for the business that actually occurs. Or, so there's a lot of different strategies about also how many linear feet somebody are in your ground can be charged at a different rate too than the percentages that are capped for what's called either privilege tax or the right-of-way fee, which is almost the same thing. The privilege tax actually isn't a tax. It's really more like a fee because it can get set without going to the people. But we could do a whole work session on that if you want.
Well,
at
and
some point.
we did some work a couple, 3 years ago. Didn't get to really finish that work, but that might be a conversation if it affects a particular, so for us to understand the sectors and how they're governed under federal law and those opportunities. So I just want to put a pin in that one if the council wants to revisit that in the future, but we won't go there tonight. It's as they say, it's complicated. Is that an understatement? Yeah. But it sounds like a conversation that may be worth understanding where we sit in terms of federal law today. Okay, any other questions on our operating fund license and fees? Okay, and for folks watching, there are lots of fees that we don't have, or licenses, like we don't have business licenses, and some of the other ones that other cities have. So we've kept it pretty streamlined. When you look at the list, it's not terribly long. Anything? Okay.
Moving on to intergovernmental revenues. This is the slide that gives me pause right now. You can see, looking at the chart, we're seeing a drop off of liquor revenues or anything based off of liquor revenues. So when we last got together, I thought that the liquor store was doing really well. Apparently not. The League of Oregon Cities released a report that says overall consumption is down. So that you're seeing that is impacting us. OLCC also decided they needed to build a new warehouse. So the purchase of the land and the construction and all of that, they're able to claw back some of the revenues that would have gone to the city to help construct that. It gets worse. It gets worse. According to the LOC report, they initially estimated it was about $60 million to build it. Their estimate is now $120 million. So it's basically doubled in cost. So I just hope they're holding all the good stuff there.
That's the cost of the refit on Center Street Bridge. Just saying.
And just out of curiosity,
Council President Starr, yes.
what's the property tax that the state's gonna pay on that $120 million warehouse? Just asking.
That's a real good
Zippity-doo
question.
and dah, I believe. Mr. Thompson.
Tim, if I'm not mistaken, when we met last time, you thought we were about 40,000 off on our liquor revenue. And at the time, I committed Councilor Duran and I to personally look into that, see what we could do. And it sounds like we need to do more. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, please.
Jonathan, are you all Say again? I do. I'm right behind you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are looking at about a $200,000 hole right there right now. So it's going to take all of us.
And this is, and if I may, as I understand it, this is a statewide trend and might be even national. As I'm reading in some of the SEDCOR and other trade literature that Particularly wines are seeing a decline just nationally, as we're coming out of the pandemic years. And, some of the other, specialty, beverages, really dropping off now last year and this year. So we're not alone in this, and those numbers are dropping off, as far as I know.
What's a specialty beverage?
We already do.
Oh, like beer and wine?
That's all the alcohol. Is that correct? The oils, the dollars we get from the state, is that beer and wine only, or is it all alcohol sales?
I think it's all, but I think the rates are different. And from what I understand, the hard liquors have the stiffer tax rates. So drink the hard stuff, folks.
But don't drive. But don't drive. Okay, keep it local.
That's,
Mayor?
Yeah, oh, wow, that's huge. Counselor Christopher.
What about pot money? Oh.
Okay. We will talk about our sales tax shared revenue.
yeah, we do have a sales tax, and it's kind of holding its own. It's about 150,000 a year, 150 to 180,000 a
That
year.
we get.
Is what we get, yes.
Where, is that here in the intergovernmental?
No, I bury that in our property taxes, or taxes overall. It's our only sales tax. And I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Why?
The federal government never really has come
I
to grips
know.
with the fact that many states like Oregon have legalized this, the cannabis, derivatives.
It's also part of I guess, state law, that unfortunately for us, the amount is so small that in theory, you could do some mental math and figure out how much sales are going on in each of the different locations. And that would mean that you're probably privy to their private property or their private income tax information. So it kind of goes south from there just because they're so small at this point.
Follow up, Mayor.
Follow up?
So is this special tax increasing or is it staying the same?
It's pretty flat right now.
It's pretty flat, okay. And liquor's down. Well, you can see what's happening.
People are getting back to work. And as I understand with the cannabis industry also, that one began flattening out as, in the startup years, a lot of people got into the business and we've had I'm sorry about this, a weeding out of successful and unsuccessful businesses. You're welcome.
There's no banking. So has the revenue been blunted?
I started something, sorry about that.
We might need to move on now.
All right, moving on to expenses. This is a little safer. So when we look at the general operating fund, 76% of that is personal services, so that is staffing costs, so taxes, retirement, insurance, wages, all of that. Material services about 19%, and then capital outlay. In this area, it's pretty small. It's primarily police vehicles and a little bit of park improvement stuff. So when we look at the staffing for the general operating fund, we have two components. We have folks that are directly, almost 100% supported by the general fund. And those would be the police officers, planning, code enforcement, parks, municipal court. And then you have folks like me that maybe 50% of my compensation is supported by the general fund. Those are the indirect people, so you have finance, IT, city recorder, so on. So an allocation of all of the overhead kind of costs get sent to the general fund for the services that we provide to the services in the general fund. So overall, we are down, and you can see the biggest area where we're down is the police department. We went from 46.83 people last year to about 44 this year. We do have some recruitments in process, so this may go up slightly if we get some more folks in the door. But planning, code enforcement, parks is up slightly. We did add an additional body partway through last year, so you're seeing the annualized impact of that. And then municipal court, just one person there. If you look at all the indirect folks, really not a lot of changes there, so the composition of the administration is about the same. Moving on to the materials and services. The biggest component that we talk about every year is 911 services. That's the single biggest material and service in the general operating fund. It's about $567,000 this year, and that's net of $225,000 of 911 taxes that get applied against it. So it's a big number. But 911 services is pretty important, and it's something that we couldn't provide that service ourselves, at least not at that dollar amount. So we are getting a bargain for what we're paying for, but it is expensive still.
And something I'd like to point out, and I'll go to Council President Starr, is that, you know, similar to the conversation we just had about that very expensive warehouse, several years ago, the Office of Emergency Management began sweeping the interest on the funds collected from like I think it's what, $1 or something on each cell phone for 911 services. And then there's interest accrues, they now sweep it. So it doesn't go to the municipalities who are having to pay for the services. It goes to the OEM, if I remember correctly. So that was, again, another ding to the local. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, on bullet point 3, can you talk about what municipal court assessments are in terms of an expense? Because that's what this is, right?
Correct. So every citation that we write has a fine amount. And that fine amount, there's a different allocation where the dollars have to go to. So some of them go to the county, some go to the state to pay for different services that they're. So I want to say we have to pay probably 20% of the citation amount, roughly in that range.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
So I tried to make this one as small as possible too,
Yeah,
because
no
this is
kidding.
really where it starts to get scary. So we put together an analysis of the general operating fund, making the assumption that we're not going to have any increases of any kind that we can impact. So no increase in the police fee, no increase in the parks fee. Basically what this is telling us is 2024-25, revenues in excess of expenditures, about $610,000. So we're going to have about $610,000 of profit. That's going to get rolled into next year, where if we get to full staffing, all of the trends that we're seeing, we're expected to have a loss of $1.8 million. This isn't unexpected, as we've talked about before. We typically budget more in expenses than we bring in revenues to keep the pressure on to provide services. This is a little bit more than what we've seen in the past. Normally it's between $600,000 and $800,000. And then we typically save everywhere we can to try to break even by the end of the year. And oftentimes that comes at the cost of delaying or freezing police positions because they're 100% funded by the general fund. This model does not assume any frozen positions. So as we project out into the future, this is the fully loaded. This is hopefully the scariest prediction that we'll have to be looking at. But it's not super great. By the year 26-27, you can see that our ending fund balance is down to about $2,290,000, or roughly about 15% of our current revenues. And that's the benchmark for us. We want to make sure that our ending fund balance is always about 15%. So that way we have enough cash in the bank to be able to pay all of our bills until November when property tax revenues come in. And then the bank account gets refilled and we can continue on until the next year. So what we're saying is we got enough in the bank at this point with the projections that we have to get to the end of 26-27, assuming full staffing, everything. There'll probably be some cost savings in there, so we'll be able to push out a little bit past that, but probably not much further with no fee increases of any kind. Don't know if this, I guess part of our goal tonight is to get some feedback from you folks of how does that feel from a policy standpoint? We do have another projection that we'll get to in a couple slides with the staff recommendation, or at least the beginning of a staff recommendation. But we wanted to at least get this in front of you to show you what this may look like. I'm going to introduce you to Mount Doom. So this slide, the gray area is our ending fund balance, the reserve. The blue area is our recommended reserve at the end of the year. And then the orange is our surplus or deficit in any given year. And the idea would be that we have a nice mountaintop from all the ARPA funds and CARES grants and all that kind of stuff that we've saved up for a while. It'd be really great to use those down until the gray matches the blue, and we have a nice soft landing, and the gray continues to climb at the same rate as the blue. Right now, you can see that that's not necessarily the case. 27, 28, that's really where the issue is, that we'll need to start thinking about making some drastic changes if we don't make some changes by that point. So anyway, the idea is we'd like to get a nice soft landing if we can somehow. We have a couple of years to deal with it, but we got to start now is kind of the message. Moving on, we have some recommended increases. This is not necessarily a fix-all, but we just want to get this in front of you folks to ponder before we get together for budget meetings. Again, this is not going to be a fix by any means, but we're looking at potentially of a 10% increase in the police services fee starting next year. And then we want to be a little bit conscious of folks at home, and we pushed out a park service fee for a couple of years. That may or may not be the case. We'll get to the park stuff a little bit later tonight, and we can talk about some of the needs that we have as far as capital outlay go. So anyway, again, our goal when we were putting this together, when we talked last year, was to try to get to 28, 29, when we'd have some dollars free up out at Kaiser Station because this Kaiser Station LID would be all paid off. We would get a one-time influx of some dollars, and we would use that to set up a PERS liability or a PERS side account or something similar to that to give us benefits into the future. So that's kind of the game we're playing, and that is not factored into this projection, you know, the 28, 29 influx of cash. It's a little far out. Probably a little bit too far out to count on at this point. I just want to make sure. We do have a PERS side account factored in for the property sales if we decide to go that way, in addition to the loan repayment if they're kind of grossing it up, so we have a choose your own adventure.
So can I park on what you just said? So does this financial projection use the assumption that we're going to use about 3.5 million at this point for paying down the unfunded actuarial liability, the UAL?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's slide 26.
Correct.
Or is it, or slide 25? Well, I'm looking at the picture. I like pictures. Yeah,
Well, let's
so
go to-
25,
let's go to Mount
26.
Doom then.
Okay. Yeah, Mount less, a little bit less doom. but
So a
that
little
is
bit
with the-
less. Yeah, you can kind of see the gray kind of
Okay.
sloping in a little bit. And again, we are going to have some cost savings in there. I just don't know exactly where. We typically do because we budget for where we think a reasonable area would be. And we know there's going to be some cost savings somewhere. We just don't know exactly where.
Okay,
So again, you can see the landing's probably going to get us safer to 27, 28 instead of 26, 27. So we've kind of bought a year by adding the 10% and the 5% to the parks fee at some point in time. So not the greatest of news, but this is kind of a model that we've been seeing for at least the 10 years that I've been around.
and I've got one more question. I'll go to Councilor Christopher. The total that we're looking at, and I think I know the answer, on the two property sales that are in progress is 5.5, and you're calculating 3.5, and the reason is?
It was just an apples to apples related to the PERS debt or the retiree tier 1, tier 2 issue.
Is there a way to pay more down, or is there a limitation on the state on how much we can put into the side account?
I don't believe there's a limitation, although their match does max out at 300,000.
Okay. And then one more question, and that would be, because there was two PERS areas, one as that match, but the other one on the retiree pay down issue on the bonding and so forth. That would be that other area of possible savings?
Correct.
Thank you.
So-
Counselor Christopher?
Thank you, Mary. I thought you were going where I was going. So the proceeds from the property that we're selling is 5.5, you're projecting taking 3.5. What are you gonna do with the other 2 million? And where's the opioid money? What did we collect in 2024, and what are we gonna get in 2025? And
So
I
let
can
me
keep going.
start answering that, and Mr. Wood can finish. The sell the property on the northwest corner of Kaiser Station Boulevard in Lock Haven. That, about $1 million of that total was going to pay back the street fund from
Oh,
which-
that's right.
where it was originally bought. So that's a big chunk of it, but, we'd advocate for using as much as possible to put towards that side account, because that can reduce, the present value of it will help reduce.
That's bad, that's real bad. So, follow up, Mayor? But we could use, potentially, just asking, we could use that $1 million. So 1 million's gone, 2 million left, yeah? 1 million's gone to pay back street fund. So that leaves $1 million. That could supplant the budget instead of increases.
So if you put it towards the budget, you get one-time
Right.
money to spend. If you put it towards the PERS unfunded accrued liability, you get perpetuity.
Okay. And where's the opioid money?
The opioid money, we get about 80,000 a year.
That's what we got in '24?
Correct.
Okay,
And right now, we're using it for police.
right. Okay. Is that taken into consideration in this model?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How much would the city save per year, taking that $1 million and putting it back into the PERS requirement? How much would that save us a year perpetually?
Sure. I would say about 100,000.
Okay.
Other questions?
So doing a little bit deeper dive, if we look at the park fund, this is where it's going to get a little bit interesting. For this, we project no increases in any of the revenues. By and large, we're okay. However, when you look at the capital outlay line, we're not going to be investing a whole heck of a lot into the park system over the next several years. We started off with 300,000 for the next 2 years, then dropped to 200,000, then 100,000. That's great. Everything kind of balances at the bottom. However, when we go to the next page, we really have a capital plan of about 500,000 a year. So we're going to have to do some selective planning, scale back, look at these as far as priorities go, to figure out what we have to get done in the next couple of years versus what can we push out. Or we look at doing a police or a park fee increase sooner rather than later. So that's kind of some of the policy decisions we'll have to work through as we get into the budget committee time.
Mr. Thompson has a question.
Tim, it says on this, on line 3, it says general fund support for the parks, and that's flat. My understanding was that we were going to, the parks fee was going to be, or the general fund support for the parks was going to be tied to some percentage of the general fund itself. So shouldn't that be increasing?
At this point, we do have it tied, but we've been over what we've been required to put in for a while. So that's why you're not seeing it go up, and I think it's 2.5% or 3%, something like that. So we haven't got to the point where it has to go up yet.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't understand that. What?
So the city is required to, I think, put in at least 2.5% of general fund revenue into the park system.
Okay.
And so we've calculated that out, and I think we're actually closer to 3% at this point.
That we're putting in.
Correct.
Okay, we're overfunding it out of the general fund. Okay.
But they kind of all get slapped together
Yeah.
as one fund, so, yeah.
Anything else on the Parks Fund or the Parks Capital Plan?
So if we look at what the 10% or the 5% increase in the park fee looks like if you go out to 27, 28, it really doesn't change the capital outlay very much. So we may want to think about moving that up in the rotation if we can, if we want to continue to maintain the capital improvement plan as it is, so.
Okay.
Moving on to the police fund, or the police fee. Again, this is what we would present if we had no police fee increase at all, just keep everything status quo. Again, looking to the capital outlay line, we're okay this year, next year, 26, 27. But after that, we basically get to the point where we're not investing in any more police vehicles. Then when we get to 28, 29, we really are upside down. We're going to need to start looking at staffing levels to figure out what we can maintain. And then it just kind of continues to get worse as you go out into the future. So the real question is, what level of support do we want to continue to provide to the police department for the capital outlay plan? And again, that's all pretty much police vehicles at this point. If we go to a 10% increase in the fee, you can see that our capital outlay is pretty much where we need it to be until 2930.
So one question I've got is pretty much all of the jurisdictions around us have public safety fees. Marion County, the unincorporated areas like Janry and Four Corners, those are already at 12 per month per household, if I remember correctly. Dollars.
We're one of the cheapest.
$12 per month per household. So Marion County has that in Janry and Four Corners, which is, our unincorporated area is about the same size as the city of Kaiser in population. Salem has a public safety fee, and I'm trying to remember if some of our other jurisdictions around here also have those and what those kind of look like. So I'm not going to ask you to pull that out of your head, but just to give us a sense of what that's looking like with our comparables. That would be helpful. We are clearly one of the lowest, but, the costs are similar across the board.
We do the just barely.
Well, on the fee, that is true, but on the, paying the salaries, benefits and so forth, as Mr. Wood said, we try to keep, especially when we're negotiating our contracts, we're keeping that center space as much as possible. Given the mercurial, interest rates and, cost of living over the last couple of years have made that even more intriguing, shall we say. But that would be helpful, kind of know where we land with some of our comparables in this region and alternates to property tax.
We could share that with you in the budget committee.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. As long as you're at it, if they also have parks or other similar types of fees, it'd just be nice to know where we stand with our region. Okay. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think these fees were implemented before I came on to council. Can I get a quick, not I, but I think for anybody watching that may not know, can we get a history 101 on why there was a fee versus a operating levy.
Kathy, that's you.
Yeah, so I was around then. Operating levies have to be renewed every few years. So, one of the things that the city has wanted to do is make sure that we have funding that is predictable year over year, because as we've heard from police chief, recruiting and retaining police officers, with a predictable revenue stream is really important for retention. So it had been the policy of the city and practice up until, well, to date, to not do operating levies. We've seen the level of effort necessary by our fire districts. And when they've had the misfortune, Marion County Fire 1 had that of a failed operating levy, they had to cut personnel. So it has not been the practice. In the city charter, the city council has the authorization to impose fees. So after 2 years of work, research, outreach for both police and for parks, looking at the level of service. Also, at the time we began the work to look at a police fee, we had 5 frozen positions. And we had no means of generating revenue to unfreeze those positions. So they were budgeted, but we were not hiring, the city was not hiring them. We had no cash to pay them. So with that, what we did was, with that outreach and a model of what different levels of a fee would pay for, in 2016, it was determined that $4 per month per household would raise enough revenue to get our parks moving forward with adequate staffing for maintenance, and then begin the process of the repairs. And at the same time, looking at the police fee, which was set at $4 per household per month, looking at the 5 frozen positions to get those, enough revenue in to get those moving. Also, at that time, we looked at indexing the police fee, so it would continue to maintain a level of service that was consistent. So that was the decision made by the council in 2016 to make sure that we would have consistent funding and also would not raise the property taxes of local residents during that time. Councilor Christopher.
And so the fees that were implemented by the 7 city councilors. But
Correct.
it was no vote of the people.
That is correct.
And a levy would require a vote of the people
Every 5 years.
every 5 years.
Yep. That is absolutely correct. Ms. Martin.
And my assumption is a service fee is paid for by everybody that's a resident in Kaiser, as opposed to a levy that is paid for only by property owners.
True.
Is that correct?
True.
And it was paid by everybody, including nonprofit or other properties. That is true. It applies to all of them. We also did, and I remember we had a very in-depth conversation about our multifamily, so that they have a calculated rate based on general vacancy rates. So it is actually per, if you have a 20-unit apartment complex, they have a lower rate, but we don't have to go, okay, you had 19 units filled, 18 units filled, 17, back and forth. It's just a flat rate that's been calculated based on average vacancy rates in our region.
Does that get updated?
Follow up, Mayor?
It's been pretty consistent. I mean, yeah, it could be higher.
I mean, do we look at that every year?
Yes.
Yes.
So follow up,
Councilor
Mayor.
Christopher.
So in the police budget, you said we're good for this year and next year, and then things start to get serious. So we have time, we could go out on an advisory vote before we actually need to raise the fees, the police fees. We could go out on an advisory vote. There's time to do that. Accurate?
I'm just trying to do the calendar in my head. I think I would imagine yes.
I think so too. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Something I've noticed this past year, and more recently shared amongst the different city managers, is that there's a multi-level fee, because when you think about it, Lowe's is paying the same $12 fee as the mayor is paying on her own, or any of us are. And so I've seen some of the cities do a much higher fee based on square foot, or there'd be different ways to calculate it, but maybe capture some of these big box stores a little more.
Yeah, all the properties are paying the same amount, and that's how we started it in 2016, and that has, to my knowledge, we have not revisited that. So, that may be something that we can look at, some different models on how that's being calculated for different property types. Yeah. And that's something that, you know, if the city council then looks at that and determines it's, fair and equitable, could, you know, take action in that as well. But also, you know, how much of the deficit is going to, impact. So that'd be good data to have. So thank you for that, Mr. Brown. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I 100% understand the thinking and the reasoning behind stable funding for our law enforcement. I think I would be encouraged to have, how do we have conversations with our community? I mean, I understood Councilor Christopher asking about an advisory vote. I think I would prefer to have a conversation. And I don't know what right off thinking what that looks like, but how do we start, or can we start the conversation? Because I don't want to wait. When you say we have time for and I understand what an advisory vote is, but I also understand that one of the top concerns that I hear from our residents is they want to feel safe in Kaiser. And so I would prefer to have conversations starting now about what it might look like if we don't have stable funding for our law enforcement. And what does that look like? So how do we go about that? I don't necessarily just want to do a advisory vote and then go from there. I want to start having conversations, because I think, I mean, we can do the work and have, and go around door to door, but I think everybody's going to say they want to feel safe in their homes, safe in our parks, safe walking on our streets, and safe driving around town. That doesn't equal less funding for our police department. Those two things do not go together. And so I want conversations about how we keep stable funding for our law enforcement. So how do we do that? And can we start tomorrow? Because this scares the bejeebers out of me to see the decline and the gap. Anyone?
So,
No, I agree. No, I totally agree with what you're saying.
so Council President Starr, yes, and, you know, this takes me back to 14-16, when we were starting this conversation for the need for a police services, public safety fee to make sure that we could fully fund the staffing that was being frozen at that time, to do it before we get to the position where that's the only option available to us. A lot of it is really good information from our police. What do our dollars buy in terms of safety services? What is the technology and benefits that we are using to help keep our community more safe? And then have, I liked how you put it this afternoon when we were talking to the marketing students, a town hall in a box, that we can take, you know, information to every place we go, our neighborhood associations, our neighborhood family councils, to our churches, to other organizations in the community, similar to what we did. When we did this in 2016, we talked to people coming out of the grocery store. We talked to people at any place and every place we were going to get input and get questions answered, so people would understand that we mean it. I think one of the really key things we have, and thank you for saying get on this now, is to have these conversations with our community so people don't go blithely along thinking we're good, and then we hit 2 years from now going, whoops. You know, we've got to do something about it. This is a smart community. Let's bring everybody along in the conversation and make sure that folks understand what we're talking about, because the support in this community for public safety services, for our police, the personnel that work with them, our support staff that make sure they have what they need to do their job, the equipment that we are now able to bring on board is really, really important for folks to understand. And our community is smart. They'll figure it out real fast. Ms. Martin.
I, in my career, was a pollster, and we worked very often with cities and counties. And the difference in cost for residents in Kaiser for a police fee versus a property tax is huge. So we're paying, what, $12 a month? If, let's say we were paying $12 a month, or $10 a month, that'd be $120 a year. And the average property owner, let's use the $490,000 home, and it was assessed at $490, and it was $1 per thousand, that'd be $490 extra a year that we would pay in property taxes for our police with a levy. So when we approach it, or when we have these town halls, I feel like it's very important that we articulate the difference and what it could mean for our property taxpayers, as opposed to doing a fee that will cover our police services at a much more reasonable cost for residents.
And that definitely figured into how we approached this back in 2016 as well. And there was a sense of fairness from a lot of folks in the community that it was a cost that was being spread across the community. It was a reasonable and predictable amount. We knew how much it was going to be. And we baked in that if there was a household that was experiencing financial difficulties, our utility billing staff will work with them to make sure that they're okay. And the number one thing is that their utility bills are being paid. So we baked that in right from the start. I'm going to go with Councilor Parsons first, and then back to Councilor Christopher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think my concern, when we did this, it was for 5 police officers. So we've gone years and years now. If we still do the 5 police officers, is the rest of our general fund going to be able to handle
No.
the rest of them? No. So what does that look like then? Do we have to change that? Because if we care about keeping them all, then we need to think about that can't just be for 5 police officers. That has to, be able to fund whatever we need in excess of that. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that was part of the analysis that Chief Teague did when he brought to us a services level. That was a one-pager. It was really easy to hand out to people. This is what we're looking at in terms of level of service for public safety, the types of services that we offer with this amount of money. And that is something that, in terms of outreach to the community, something really clear. I'm not going to say simple, because I don't want to underestimate the intelligence of our community. I want it really clear what the ask is and why, so that as we have conversations with people with this town hall in a box, that we are giving true and accurate data for level of service and what it really costs to maintain the staffing level necessary for people during this time period, this population level, because we have more people in town. I know not a lot, but we do have more. Since 2016, but our calls for service got a whole lot more complicated with things like the opioid epidemic and fentanyl. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I think that's something else we need to consider as well when we're talking to the community, is the types of calls that our police are now having to respond to that may have changed over time. I'm going to go to Mr. Brown, and then Councilor Christopher, I'll come to you. And then back to you.
Happy to go after Councilor Christopher.
Okay, Councilor Christopher.
Oh, I totally agree that, yes, we get started on this sooner rather than later, but I don't want to forget the community. And this community, I've lived in Kaiser for almost 40 years, and in 40 years, the community of Kaiser supports public safety. They support police and fire, and they have done it time and time again. Your husband's in fire service. And I don't want to get to the point where 7 or even 14 people make that decision for the residents. I think we have to do a better job than we did in 2016 of getting the word out. And then I think we have to ask the folks. And then once they approve those fees and once they, and they will, and once they understand them, then that builds in that continuity so that they don't have to worry about being safe in their own community. But it's unfair of us to make that decision and leave the people out of it that are paying for it.
Council President Starr. You had, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, and then back to.
I just didn't want President Starr comment to go without staff reaction. I totally agree with you. As our executive team looked at this, and we knew that this would be a launching point for having to make a course correction. The nice thing is this process allows us to see a couple years out and to start adapting now. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is to start the conversations. And as a team working with our council, we could put together a program where we can do that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that, and I think our community will appreciate that conversation starting yesterday. So I just want to confirm my understanding. The police services fee as it stands now is or is not indexed to a certain number of positions?
So the genesis of it was, we looked back at the records last year, and the genesis of it was, it said, well, Chief T, what do you need to have a highly functioning or an optimal functioning police department? And he said 5 more positions. And so that's where the fee came about. But the enacting in legislation was that it was never tied to that 5, but in practice, ever since I've been here, and I think before, we have tied it to it, but it wasn't ever tied to that by legislation.
By policy.
Great.
By state
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, that was a policy decision made, and that's something that's been in our policies that can be changed if necessary, but I would agree that this would have to be with understanding our services, service delivery model before making recommendations. And we have time. Not a lot, but we have time. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
I will go on to Mr. Wood for the next pages.
Thank you for that discussion. Water system, we're moving to our utility funds. Overall, there's about 11,000 metered accounts in the city of Kaiser. Moving on, in comparison to other locations, we pay $16.61 a month in water, and everyone else pays a heck of a lot more. That's because we typically just pump it out of the ground where everyone else is getting it out of the streams, and they have to clean it and we don't. So we're pretty lucky here.
Nature took care of it for us beautifully, and our public works staff, I want to give a huge kudos to Mr. Lawyer and his staff for their incredible professionalism and hard work to make sure that our system is extremely well maintained. Thank you. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, excuse me, thank you. Mr. Wood, I noticed our date that you have next to the 1661 is over a year old. Do we have, is that the last time that the rate changed? Is there an upcoming rate change? Because I just want to make sure.
So I left that rate in from last year because that's what the
Right.
residents are feeling.
Right.
Last
Okay.
year, we did do a rate increase, although we used ARPA funds to pay for it.
Right. Okay. So I just want to, if anybody's looking, I just want to make sure that they see that that's compared to the other dates for the other cities and their rates. I do wonder if I can follow that up. If we should also start the conversation when we're talking about, when we're just having revenue and expense conversations. I mean, this is it's half of the next closest city in terms of comparison. I worry about what that, I think we should just have conversations about what that next increase might look like to residents. Because I know we paid for ARPA funds. I just want to make sure that we're getting that communication out there sooner rather than later.
Excellent suggestion.
Thank you.
Counselor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, you mentioned we have 11,000 metered services.
That is correct.
Okay, so is that what we're currently basing the police fund and the parks fund on? Are those metered services, or are there other places that are paying those two fees that are not metered?
If you get I think that's, if you get a utility bill, is that where the parks and police fees occur? And if you don't get a water utility bill, do you still pay them? Is that the question you're answering?
Well, that's part of it, and then
Okay.
the other is, do we have people that are receiving water that are unmetered? I guess is the other part.
Have their own well, you mean? Oh, not working.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm scared.
Try. Hello, here we go. Don't touch it, Shane, leave it. There are no unmetered connections in the city of Kaiser. Every service is metered. We read every meter every other month. Some services we don't bill for, like city parks, those kind of facilities, but everything is metered.
Okay, and then follow up, is everybody that gets a water bill, a public, what do we call that, public service fee? Do each of those things, does anybody pay that's not metered water?
No.
Thank you.
Sewer only accounts pay the fees, do they not?
Oh, that's correct. Yep, sewer only.
A couple hundred, whatever that is, how many sewer only accounts?
Yep, you are correct, Mr. Lawyer.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Not sure what he said.
Oh, he's,
Sewer.
yeah.
There are homes in Kaiser that have private wells, they're not on city water, but they do pay a sewer bill. And so if they pay a sewer bill, they also pay the police and parks.
Perfect, thank you.
Good? Okay. Counselor Christopher?
So the comparable rates, that's just water. There's nothing else.
That is correct.
Okay.
So looking backwards, you can see the amount of capital outlay. Just doing a quick line, we spend, $600,000, $800,000 a year on capital outlay for the water fund. A majority of that is the steel water line replacement project. We're replacing all those with ductile iron pipe. We got about $4.5-ish million left, dollars worth to do there. Then the only other thing identified in the master plan is a reserve pump station, and if we may or may not need that one, yet to be determined.
Counselor Christopher?
That's my question. So the 4.5 million for the ductile iron pipe is from the 2012 master plan. So that's a 23-year-old master plan. And master plans are typically for 20 years, fair? So we're 3 years overdue, and wasn't the additional reservoir and pump station based on we were gonna have a lot more people move in?
The short answer to that question is yes, but population projections did not amount to what were projected in 2012.
Right.
So we're 13 years past the master plan, not 23 years, 13 years.
Okay, So they're 10-year master plans?
20-year master plan should be revisited about every 10 years.
Okay, so we
And,
should do this.
Well, I have been advocating not to spend money for a master plan update because the master plan capital improvement program is primarily water main replacements.
Yeah,
That's not going to change with the master plan update. It didn't make fiscal sense to me to update a plan just because practice says you should. Let's look at the content of the plan and what we expect the outcome of an update to be. And I expect the outcome of the update to be the same capital improvement plan.
so we don't have to build a reservoir and a pump station just because it's in the master plan.
We do not, but we will at some point need that facility. I just can't tell you when.
Okay. But the budget isn't based on building that. I mean, because my understanding was when we did a master plan, all of the things are listed out, and that's how we determine what the budget's going to be. So that a reservoir and a pump station would have been budgeted into that, no?
Not exactly. The rate structure that was done in rate study, Tim, you remember what year that was done? I don't remember. I want to say 2002. It was quite a while
I
ago.
think that's correct.
2002, this is
Yeah.
2012.
The rate study that was done in 2002 looked at the water master plan and looked at the capital improvement program in the water master plan at the time and projected the revenue needs, okay? When the master plan was updated in 2012, the capital improvement program didn't change. It just got carried forward from 2002. Okay? The big things that we accomplished all of the identified capital improvements in the earlier version of the master plan, except for the reservoir, which was not needed, the pump station, and mainline replacement.
I mean,
So that just carried forward into the 2012. No need to update the rate study because, again, the capital plan, capital improvement plan, didn't really change a whole lot.
Okay.
When that was used to structure the rates for the water system. And I understand it's 20 years old, 20 plus years old, recognize that. We're getting to the point where we need to do that again, for various reasons. But that's, I think we've done a good job of taking the water rate revenue and putting it to work effectively every year and continue to do that.
how many water mains are we yet to do?
I don't know how many feet it is, honestly.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's a matter, I'd have to look at the numbers, I can get that, but it's a few 100,000 feet still.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Any other questions on the water system capital outlay? One thing that I would imagine is that, like all of our other capital outlay expenditures, inflation hit it. Would that be an accurate statement, Mr. Lawyer?
Inflation certainly has
Yeah.
reduced the amount that we can do every year as far as feet of pipe, because we only have so much money and it doesn't go as far as we used to. So yes, and that's going to continue.
Okay, thank you. So the rate of replacement will be completely dependent upon, or partly dependent upon the amount per foot replacement cost.
Yes, the time it takes to replace the remaining pipe has a direct relationship to the amount of cost per foot. Yes.
And if a follow-up on that, delaying the replacement increases the risk of a break on the older system. Would that be, or a failure?
Yes, I would say a failure. Steel pipes don't historically break. That's more of a cast iron or a Dr. wire kind of, primarily cast iron, or some plastic pipes. Steel pipes leak and they'll fail at a joint because they're the way they're put together. But I wouldn't really classify it as a break. It's more as a failure of the pipe itself.
So pipe failures,
Yes.
Ex-
They will increase, absolutely.
okay, and that's where we lose water from the system, it goes back, just leaks it back into the soil. Okay, thank you. Anything further? Okay,
So consistent with the other areas, we did put together a projection with 0 increases. And again, going to the capital outlay line, we're good this year, next year, year after. But in 27, 28, we basically stopped doing investments into our water system, which is kind of bad news bears at that point. As Mr. Lawyer indicated, our capital plan really is primarily water main replacement program. 4.5 million left to approximately to do there. That'll take us probably the next 4, 5, 6 years to accomplish, depending on what happens with our purchasing power. We did put together another analysis. What would it look like if we had a rate increase? So for 25, 26, I'm basically asking for a 1% increase, but it's going to look like a 5% to the residents at home because of the ARPA dollars that were used to fund the increase last year. With that, we're able to really fully fund the capital plan through 2930. And at that point, then we'd probably need to readdress, what do we have left? Do we need to have rate increases? What does the new master plan look like?
Questions? Councilor Christopher?
So wonder if we did not do a 1% increase in 25, 26, 26, 27, and then did it in 28. That would just prolong being able to swap out those main lines, correct? But we're good for the next, business as usual for the next 2 years. Right?
There is some compound. I'd have to go back and run the numbers on that. I have not put that thought together.
Would you do that before we get into budget, just so we know about that? Because, we're in crazy times, and we keep thinking every year it's not going to be as crazy as the last year, and yet here we are. So I would just like to know what the impact would be, because that's the reason we chose to use ARPA money last year, was because inflation was 8%. We thought this would get better, and we thought that things would level out. And yet, here we are paying $12 for eggs. So I would just like to see what difference that would make. And we may choose to do nothing and do exactly what you've recommended, but I'd sure like to see the numbers.
Sure, I can definitely put that together.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Data's power. Okay, anything further on the water system? And then, so you've got the no rate increase, and then what the 5% looks like here.
Correct.
Okay.
Moving on to the stormwater system. They do a lot of things, all kinds of stuff. Just going to get us to the page. We haven't had a rate increase in our stormwater funds since January 2020. When we look at the comparable rates, again, we're not half of everyone else, but we are significantly lower than everyone else in our region.
Any questions on our stormwater system? Yeah. Correct. No, that was something that was put in place when we had to get the MPDES permit, and we created the stormwater facility, our utility. Let me back up real quick. On the water rate analysis, it is on page 38, slide 38, showing that the difference in the fees, if we were looking at the 5% increase going from, for residential, 1305 to 1370 per month. So 65 cents per month. So that starts to give you an idea of what that would look like on the monthly, and then of course double because you get bi-monthly bills. So yeah, some of that data is already in here for folks who are following along at home. Sorry, back to our stormwater. Mr. Brown.
Mayor and committee, I don't know, because it's been since before I got here, whether council or the staff didn't present you an option for a stormwater fee increase. But in other places I've been in, we've kind of weighed the effect of a incremental raises each year versus having to do a fix after a number of years. When you look at something like the stormwater fee, a 3% of $7 is not very much each year, but having to write it 5 years later does seem like a big whack. Something to think about.
Yeah, start to index or, yeah. So, does anybody object to seeing what an index fee would look like when we get into the budget process?
No, I'd like to see it.
Yeah. Sure. Let's look at least CPI so that the cost of labor and materials that we can, not lose ground in paying for these services makes a lot of sense. And, as many of you mentioned, it's a lot easier to budget year over year when it's, you know, incremental rather than whoops, because I don't think that looks very responsible. Okay. And again, page 41 for folks following along at home shows us at the $7.66 per month, and the closest one to us is West Lynn at $9.53 per month. Okay. Mr. Wood?
So looking at page 42, our capital outlay has been a little sporadic. However, you can see kind of a consistent trend heading up. If you just do a line on there. Unfortunately, we are hitting the point where capital outlay is going to be much more consistent. The capital plan does project $1 million plus in each given year. Similar to the other utility, we did put together what would it look like with no rate increase. And basically we get through 25, 26 partial capital outlay, and then we're pretty much out of funds for doing anything into the future. So that's not a super great solution for us. The capital outlay plan, we have the 5 years, and again, each year is above 1 million right now. And we have a few things that we have to do. The Willow Lake Estate Storm Drain Realignment, that's a multi-year project that we're gonna need to get done. Then we're also identifying things through our CCTV inspection program as well that need to be taken care of. So with that, we rolled in a plan where we increased the fee. It does look like 25%, but as City Manager Brown said, the dollar amount is not huge. It's just a small base number that we've been dealing with since 2020. If we do that, 25% for the next 2 years, then drop it down to 10%, we would be able to continue on with the capital outlay plan and hit the majority of what we're trying to accomplish.
Question, Councilor Christopher.
So why haven't you increased it in 5 years?
We haven't needed to.
Well, I mean, it kind of looks like you needed to, because you've only got money to do the $1 million worth of improvements for 1 year, right?
It's a good question, yeah. Good comment, yeah.
So we could have indexed this 5 years ago, and we'd be in a better position today.
We could have. I'm not sure if we would have been able to accomplish some of those projects before. So I don't know if we'd want to be sitting on people's cash too long. I guess that would be my only comment back. I think we're in a better spot now. The program's developed enough and we have the staffing to be able to do some of these projects now.
Oh, so it was a staffing issue. I still think it's a good idea. We're going to look at an index.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Mr. Thompson, if I can get a response from Mr. Lawyer, then I'll come to you.
All right. Just to tee off that, if I'm reading your chart right, we're currently sitting on about 253 days of cash in that fund. So, I mean, I'm comfortable that we didn't increase it so we're 4 times your target. So, I mean, we may need to in the future, but I think looking backwards, couldn't have justified it.
Well, especially during the, the calm, smooth waters of 19, 20, and 21.
20 and 20.
Yeah. 19 had a bit of a run-up. Mr. Lawyer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. I just wanted to weigh in and kind of defend the decision not to do a rate increase in the stormwater fund for those years. We didn't have any identified capital needs that we knew were coming up. These are new. These are a result of our video inspection of our system and time. As time goes, pipes fail. And the Willow Lake one was failing and continues to fail. And that's a major realignment. It's got pipe in backyards, you can't get to it. We evaluated all the options to try and repair what's there. It's just not, I'm not gonna say it's not possible, but it's way cost prohibitive. So instead of raising rates, fees methodically and regularly, we waited until we had an identified need for the money as opposed to charging it and putting it in the bank and not using it. So that's, just wanted to explain the background on how we got to where we are today.
Water.
We do, but it's an old county master plan that really doesn't pertain to us anymore.
Well, that
So,
totally
no,
makes
We
sense.
don't have a master plan, a current master plan. And I don't really think we need one because master plans usually are capital improvement projects, extensions, that kind of thing. We're replacing existing infrastructure.
Okay.
And we can identify that through our video inspection system.
Okay.
Anything? Anything? Okay, Mr. Wood?
Moving on to the ARPA fund. We had to have all of our dollars committed by the end of December. We did do that. So we have a few straggler projects that are just going to be wrapping up over the next year or so. The only thing that we still have outstanding is the design work on Verda to Dearborn. That's working on the east side, so we have about 100,000 committed there. Site improvement work on the Rollins property at Kaiser Station. And that's getting the dirt pushed around so that we can get in a better position to sell it. Police department staffing, about 561,000. And that's the continued rollover from the transferring that we had from last year, or I guess this year. And then Kaiser Rapids Turf Field Phase 2, which is in process as well. Once those are done, all the ARPA dollars will be done and said for.
Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, could I get just a little bit more clarity on ETA of when these are gonna be, when these projects will be done, or? Because for me, in the next year would be 2025, but I know we operate on a fiscal year, and part of the extension or the expend by date is in a different fiscal year.
Sure. I believe all of these projects should be done by the end of 2025 calendar year.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Leave no money on the table. Mr. Brown?
I do want to bring out, while I have the opportunity, the site work on the Rollins property, and we were hoping to level that to make that more marketable for sale. Recent data that we literally just got back last week, three-dimensional data of how much fill is there is probably 10 times as much as we were expecting. So we still plan on doing the movement over to Kaiser Rapids Park, but we're also going to be reaching out to contractors to see if they have soil needs, and they can come get it for free or for whatever, for their cost. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's.
Yeah. They'll move it for us, and we will help stimulate the growth of our economy through investing through dirt. Good dirt. Yep. Councilor Christopher?
So, you're still gonna move the dirt into the swale, and we're doing a structured fill.
Right now, I think the most recent conversation Mr. Lawyer and I have had together is that because that project's so far in the fat ahead, as far as whether there's the pavilion and we're probably at least 5 years out, if the Parks Plan says that we should do it,
I'm sure.
that we felt like it was the best interest just to move it with the field as it is and address it at the time of construction.
Counselor Duran.
I would say that's probably the best thing to do, just to get it over there. Because if it does need to be dug out, there's gonna be some cost, and we'll have to move some dirt around, but I'd imagine that down the road, that dirt could probably be used someplace else in Kaiser Rapids Park, so it wouldn't have to go far, or it could go across the street and at the gravel pit or something that, short distance. But getting the use out of that, location now would be best, rather than spending the extra money at the structured fill.
Okay.
Because it's not gonna, we
Because
don't
you're not
know.
going to do it right away.
And we don't know where the need for the fill, structured fill would be, so, we just have to get it moved anyway. So I think going with, just getting it filled up would be the best way to go now.
And so what's the timeline for that happening?
This summer, dry weather. I'm working on getting a bid package put together. We'll file for a 1200C permit with DEQ here pretty soon. That's
A what?
A 1200C permit.
Okay.
That is for disturbance area over 5 acres between the Rollins site and Kaiser Rapids Park. We'll have over 5 acres disturbed, so we'll have to do that 1200C permit through DEQ. That takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get that permit issued. So summertime, this needs to be done in the dry weather for obvious reasons, and wait till after Kaiser Fest this year, probably late June, early July, start moving dirt.
And then you'll seed it with grass and,
Yeah,
Great.
see it with grass.
Great.
and Then we'll mow it a couple times a year.
Counselor Duran.
So the chamber moving the Kaiser Fest to May kind of screwed them, because they don't get the benefit this year of using that swale like they'd like. So if it was in August like it was last year, they might have got to, it would have been dirt, not rock or not grass, but they would have got to use it. So this year they're going to be in trouble.
Just rock and roll. You'll roll with it? All right.
I swear we were both at that meeting.
We're investing for the future. All right. Any other questions on dirt? All right. So that took care of ARPA. Let's go take a brief look at our city council goals. Thank you to the city council and our city staff for working through the conversation around establishing our work plan, our goals for this next biennium. I'll turn over to Mr. Brown.
Thanks, and I also just want to say a big thanks for a very thoughtful conversation tonight as we've gone throughout this. Wanted to wrap up with the city council goals, because this process is really to set us off on putting together a budget that matches the council's goals and within the revenues and expenditures that we're bound by. So these council goals were worked out in February, and many of those will have will be right up on this year. Some of them maybe a little bit later in the year. The emergency operations plan revision is something that we're getting a grant from Marion County. They are helping all the cities within Marion County update their emergency operations plan. So at the time their consultant is available to come help us, we'll be jumping on that. We did some strategic planning work a year and a half ago or so, and so we want to pick up, re-engage the council, the data, and maybe even additional resident feedback to get a 5-year plan together. The Gold Star Memorial is something that is underway, and hopefully will be the funding will be wrapped up in the next couple months to pay for that. So the Parks Master Plan revision, that is a limited opening of the Parks Master Plan that the City Council requested last year to consider whether a pavilion of an undetermined size, but a pavilion should be added to the Kaiser Rapids Park. So that feedback loop will be coming soon to our neighborhood associations and Kaiser Fest. Look for opportunities to provide feedback to it and share with your neighbor when it comes out. Those surveys come out. The sidewalk gap program is something that has long been on a long-term plan, and that is addressing places where strategically we want to concentrate and maybe provide incentivize the fill of sidewalks. So we've been tasked with coming up with a program that looks at ways to partner with residents and or businesses to fill in places where we don't have gaps or we don't have sidewalks. Traffic congestion, it was agreed by the council that this was something that we need to be considering in everything we do and everything along the way as we build out and consider new development, that we take into account traffic congestion. So even with some of these developments that are coming to Kaiser Station, we'll be doing some traffic analysis as part of the process, but even probably even a little bit broader than the process might dictate, so that we can address the council's concerns on traffic management. The transportation system plan is something that most likely will happen this year. I think they were reviewing proposals for it, or am I a little far in?
Yeah, the RFP is out. We had a meeting with the review committee, so we will be reviewing proposals soon, and hopefully they will be good proposals and a consultant can get selected and under contract. So yes, the work is moving forward. It may not be completed in this next year because TSP updates take a while, but we definitely will be in the midst of that work this year.
Urban growth boundary expansion, that's a community conversation to determine if the community feels like we should or should not expand our urban growth boundaries. So we'll be looking to we're gonna have to come up with a community outreach in a box program because we've got a lot of these packet. I actually heard that term today and this morning too. I liked it from Council President Stark. So, utility discount program, something that came up last year and the city staff was tasked to do something. We have a program that's tied to Salem's qualification for a discount, but it doesn't, people under 60 are not eligible. So the council asked us to consider or look at ways where persons under the age of 60 who have a financial need, could have an opportunity to catch a break on their utility account. And then the last one on the short-term goals is the Willow Lake Settlement Agreement options review. And that is the settlement, which is a legal settlement between the city of Kaiser and the city of Salem and a third party, where development would not happen within a radius of the wastewater plant. And we would like, and our council has directed us to explore what options we have under that settlement agreement, or to amend the settlement agreement to allow for some development or some change in development to be done within that radius. So those are the short-term goals. Some of the long-term goals we talked about tonight already. The economic opportunities analysis goes hand in glove with the housing capacity analysis and the housing needs analysis, and what decisions are made with respect to the urban growth boundary expansion. And then the urban growth boundary is obviously not just a short-term plan, but it is a long-term plan. Particularly if there's decision is made by the community that it needs to expand, then that becomes a very long-term plan and a lot of resources. And then again, traffic congestion is not only a short-term goal, but a long-term goal. And then just to wrap that around, with all the stuff we've talked about tonight, when we have priorities, we gotta figure out how to fund these things amongst all those other things that we're maintaining and trying to keep the service level with. So that is our challenge, to bring something back to you. We appreciate having the goals of the city council, because that's really what should guide this committee's work, is how to fund those strategic priorities from the council.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that? And I will believe that these goals will come to the next city council meeting for adoption. So watch for that as well. So we'll have one more conversation about these goals as we move toward adoption for this biennium. Ms. Erb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, going back to the Willow Lake Settlement Agreement Options Review, can you describe that a little more? Is that part of Kaiser boundaries currently, but we can't develop inside there, or?
Right, it is, and Ms. Witham, you could correct me if, actually, it may be better answered by.
Sure, I'll take
Thank you.
I'll take a stab at it. So yeah, there was a, basically in the 90s, there was a lot of development that was happening down off of Windsor Island Road. There was a lawsuit that happened. Ultimately, there was this agreement that got struck that said, hey, in these areas, no more buildings. So some of the newer neighborhoods, actually, that some of y'all live in, couldn't be built for a while. And then in 2000 or 2001, the agreement was revisited. It was actually driven by private development in McNary Estates, Nicholas Loop, Phase 20. They came and they did some different work and studies and looked at kind of the odor plume. We kind of call it the smell zone secretly. But they basically drew a space on the map that said, hey, within this area, this is what we're going to call an odor impact overlay zone. And in conjunction with that, the city zoned those properties ag industrial, which greatly limits what can be done there. So housing is just a no-go in that specifically zoned areas. Now, there were the areas that had gotten frozen in time in the mid-90s. Those were opened back up, but if you bought a house on Trent Avenue, you have a weird rider on your deed that says you have a easement across your property for smells and odors and things to pass over your property, and you can't sue people for it. So that's, when we talk about that settlement agreement, one of the things that came out of that, the actual zone code language that was developed back then had to basically be vetted and agreed upon. So changes to that section of zoning, any future changes, have to be concurred with the parties of the agreement. And if there were comp plan zone changes or things like that proposed, you would also have to get that okayed. So we've had inquiries over the years, and actually some pressure has pushed way up in the last 2.5 years, where some private property owners have been chatting with City of Salem staff and some of the electeds and things like that to look at that agreement. When we started our strategic planning work couple years ago, I guess, that was one of the items that as we looked at things like land supply, and we know there's a limit, that was one of the things that was at least on Shane's short list of, hey, maybe that should be looked at. We've heard interest. I happen to know there's 2 properties for sale, and I get lots of calls about what can we do with it, and a big interest to develop something that's not in that current ag industrial zone allowance. But it's not that simple, because that area is pretty much that whole area that runs up to where the new mini storage is in that same zone that's prohibited. So basically everything that's north of Lock Haven is in that same prohibited area. So does that help, Jane?
A little bit, thank you. Okay. I just didn't understand why Salem was involved, if it's Kaiser.
It's because of the plant operations.
Oh, they own the sewage plant?
Right, the sewage treatment plant, they own and operate that.
They don't own it, they operate it.
Mm-hmm. And they own it.
They own the land.
Well, no.
It's a combined plant for Salem and Kaiser, so that's why.
So we own it
Contract with
jointly,
Salem.
kind of.
Yeah.
All right, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, the Willow Lake Treatment Plant is regionally owned, is operated by the city of Salem by intergovernmental agreement, if I remember correctly. And some of the land around there is owned by the city of Salem. But I don't know,
I don't think most of it.
a lot of it's private,
A lot of it's private, like,
yeah.
you got the Kerr property is the filbert trees, and the next with the ranges, that's city Salem, but then the private ones are next to that and that, so. And then, yeah, so you don't, and then the ones next to the Willow Lake, that's private too, that's John Blake's nephew and all that, so. There's only that little bit.
Right, by the city of Salem, yeah. But there's interest, as I understand it, to, be able to use it in ways, I mean, we're not talking, we're talking about opportunities that would fit close to the ag industrial, but maybe the ag industrial is a little bit too limiting or so forth, but open that conversation to, because right now that land is sitting there and it's just sitting there, not producing anything for us but air.
Dust.
And they're stuck. Yeah. Yeah, this is a stinky stuck. Okay.
I don't know, Laura, you don't live over on Trent.
You should come over for a glass of wine on the patio one of these days.
I think sometime in August?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, somebody had their hand up. I'm sorry, I lost track.
Oh, no,
Counselor Kohler. Moment gone?
I think part of the reason for some of the people wanting to do that is that technology has changed the area that is highly affected too. And so I know that there's been some major investments in reducing the odor.
The odor generation. There we go, technology. All right, anything else, Mr. Wood, Mr. Brown?
Mr. Wood has the days of your budget committee meeting on the screen there.
All right.
I just get so choked up with this meeting. It's so exciting.
Yes. And we all do, but that's why we all signed up for this. So this is going to be good stuff. Thank you all very much. I know it's been an in-depth conversation. Thanks all for hanging in there all the way through. And to Mr. Wood, Mr. Brown, Chief, Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Witham, Mr. Lindsay, Ms. Bissett, Mr. Cleaver, this great team of our ELT executive leadership team and their entire staff that take these dollars and put them to work for us. So huge thank you to all of you. Thank you to the Long Range Planning Task Force. We will get together then as the Budget Committee on May 12th. Yeah, final question?
You know what? When are budget requests, the outside budget requests due?
I believe it's Friday, April 26th or 29th, something like that.
So
Last Friday in April? Is that on the website?
So they'll be posted on the website when the outside budget requests are due and the forms.
I think we usually send out the past recipients of it. I don't think we normally entertain a request for proposals.
Right.
If people do, then tell them to come to us.
Okay.
Send forms.
So this will be sent out to the agencies, neighbor associations, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Thank you all very much. This has been very productive. Appreciate all of your work. The time is 8:33 and we are adjourned.